In early 1839, Sengbeh Pieh, later known to the world as Joseph Sink, lived a quiet, unassuming life in the lush forests of what is now Sierra Leone. He was a farmer, a husband, a father. His days were filled with tending to crops, walking the forest paths, and sharing laughter with his family. Life was hard but honest, rooted in the rhythms of the land, the wisdom of his elders, and the warmth of his people. Sengbeh had dreams too, simple ones, of raising his children safely, seeing his crops flourish, and walking freely under the African sun. But all of that changed in April 1839. While walking along a familiar forest path, Sengbeh was ambushed by a band of slave raiders. Outnumbered and desperate, he fought with every ounce of strength he possessed. The struggle was fierce. He bit, struck, and clawed at those who came to steal his freedom, but their weapons and sheer numbers overwhelmed him. Sengbeh was captured, chained, and dragged toward the distant coast. His cries echoed through the forest, swallowed by the merciless business of slavery. At the coast, he was forced onto the Portuguese slave ship, the Tequera. The ship's hold was dark, suffocating, and filled with despair. Men, women, and children huddled together, shackled and fearful, as the vessel cut across the Atlantic. The Middle Passage was a nightmare of disease, hunger, and death. Many of Sengbeh's fellow captives did not survive the journey. Yet, against all odds, Sengbeh endured. His spirit, though battered, remained unbroken. In June 1839, the Tequera arrived in Havana, Cuba. Sengbeh and dozens of other men captives were illegally sold to Spanish plantation owners, Jose Ruiz and Pedro Montez. Their lives, once defined by freedom and community, were now reduced to the dehumanizing concept of property. They were loaded onto a small schooner, La Amistad, destined for another life of forced labor on Cuban sugar plantations. But Sengbeh Pieh refused to accept this fate. On the night of July 2nd, 1839, under the cover of darkness, Sengbeh and a few others quietly retrieved hidden iron files. They worked tirelessly, chipping away at the chains that bound them. With unshakable courage, they freed themselves. What followed was a desperate, chaotic struggle, using makeshift weapons and sheer determination. The men captives overpowered the ship's crew. Their goal was not revenge. It was a universal cry of humanity, the demand for freedom. Once in control of La Amistad, Sengbeh and his companions confronted a harrowing challenge. They ordered the remaining Spanish sailors to steer the schooner back toward Africa, but the crew deceived them, turning the ship north and west under the veil of night. For nearly 2 months, La Amistad drifted along the American coastline, buffeted by the winds of uncertainty, until the U.S. Navy finally intercepted it near Long Island. The men captives were taken into custody in Connecticut and treated as criminals. They did not speak English. They did not understand the laws of this foreign land, and they had no one to advocate for them. They only knew the truth of their experience. They had been kidnapped, enslaved, and had fought valiantly to reclaim their lives. For weeks, their voices remained unheard, until a pair of black sailors recognized the men's language. Suddenly, the story that had been trapped in silence could be told. Abolitionists quickly rallied. The Amistad Committee was formed, offering food, clothing, translators, and lawyers. Sengbeh Pieh, in the eye of this storm, became the face and voice of his people. Observers described him as calm, intelligent, and naturally commanding, a man whose dignity never wavered even in the face of immense adversity. He spoke for those who could not speak, a quiet leader standing in defiance of injustice. The case became an international flashpoint. Spain demanded the captives be returned as property. Abolitionists argued that the Africans were free human beings who had only defended their liberty. After months of hearings, the matter escalated to the U.S. Supreme Court in February 1841. Former President John Quincy Adams, then 73, stepped forward to argue for Sengbeh and his companions. In a courtroom filled with the weight of history, Adams recounted the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade, the lawlessness of their capture, and the undeniable right of these men and women to resist. His words carried the force of morality and justice alike, reminding the nation that freedom was not negotiable. On March 9, 1841, The Supreme Court ruled 7-1 in favor of the Africans. They were declared free. When the verdict reached Sengbeh, he did not erupt in celebration. He closed his eyes, whispering a quiet prayer of thanks. After nearly 2 years of chains, uncertainty, and trials, freedom had finally embraced him. With the support of the Amistad Committee, Sengbeh and the survivors prepared for the long journey home. In November 1841, they boarded the ship Gentleman, sailing back to Africa. Before leaving, Sengbeh offered words that would linger. "I will tell my people that there are good men in America too." When he finally returned to Sierra Leone, Sengbeh was not the same man who had been captured. He had become a symbol, a living testament to resilience, courage, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. His story reshaped the conversation about slavery, law, and human rights. It proved that even in the darkest corners of oppression, the human spirit could rise, defiant and unbroken. The revolt on La Amistad remains one of history's most extraordinary acts of resistance. At its heart was Sengbeh Pieh, a man whose quiet strength and unwavering resolve turned tragedy into triumph. A reminder that freedom, once demanded, cannot be denied.